Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Yanina Dore, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Welcome to this special mini-series where we take a closer look at the people and organisations in the wine world who are championing diversity, equity and inclusion. So across these episodes, I'm going to be sitting down with inspiring voices from winemakers and educators to change makers across the industry, all doing meaningful work to shape a more inclusive future for wine. These conversations are designed to uplift, to challenge and to leave us all reflecting on how we can make positive changes in our own spaces, whether that's in the vineyard, the tasting room or the boardroom. While we may not be diving quite as deep into the usual wine geekery this time around, I promise you'll still walk away with plenty to think about, fresh perspectives and perhaps a few new producers to discover, all rooted in purpose. I hope each episode leaves you feeling just a little bit more inspired than when you started. So today's episode, I am joined by Wayne Quillam and Ben Hansbury, the co-founders of Mt Yengo Wines, a First Nations owned winery that's so much more than a wine label. This is a brand built on a vision of reconciliation, community, inclusion, and cultural expression. In this episode, we explore the incredible journey behind Mt Yengo. We talk about what it means to run a winery grounded in ethics and ancestral values, how art and culture weave through every bottle, and why wine can be a platform for truth-telling, healing, and connection. Wayne, an acclaimed photographer and cultural leader, shares how creativity can be a bridge to First Nations identity, while Ben touches on the wine itself and the regions. And perhaps most importantly, Wayne and Ben open up about how ancestral wisdom, intergenerational storytelling, and community leadership shape the way they live and lead. I hope this episode acts as a reminder that wine, at its best, is about connection, not just to the land, but to each other. So let's dive in to part 3. Enjoy the episode. Ben, Wayne, thank you so much for joining me. I cannot wait to kind of dig deeper into all of this storytelling, which you have promised me. But I suppose for many people listening, they will not have heard of Mt Yengo as a winery or as a wine brand because you're keeping the wines safely close at home in Australia. But for me, when I read about these wines, and the reason I said I had to come and talk to you is that this seems to be a community, basically, rather than a winery. It's rooted in values of reconciliation, of culture, inclusion. So who wants to start and share how this vision actually first came to life?
I might just say something. So, in our culture, as an Aboriginal man from beautiful Tasmania, is that when we meet new people, we always do what's called a welcome or acknowledgement of country. And so I'll say, Yo man makyama, and welcome to our land. I'm on the land of the Hansbury people down here in Victoria, where I live. And to all your listeners out there, whoever's land that you're on, from the tops of the trees to the deepest oceans, we welcome you and look after the land and leave small footprints. So thank you, sis. And it's an absolute honour to be on here with my friend and business partner, Ben. So, Ben, I'll hand over to you, brother.
Thank you,
Okay,
Wayne.
well, the brand started in 2014 with Gary Green and myself. We play rugby together, and Gary, being a successful Indigenous businessman, he knew that I was in alcohol, and we wanted to create a brand that had a positive attitude with Indigenous people in Australia. So the brand was created to promote Indigenous art and culture and create fantastic wines. So by having the art on the labels, this would draw people to be more interested in about Indigenous culture and art. A few years into this, we were only doing it in a very small way, and Wayne come along because we looked at his art and we'd love to have his art on our labels. And then we met, and from there, he loved what we're doing so much. He become a partner in the company as well. So there's the three of us in the company. These days, Gary does a lot of other businesses, so it's basically Wayne and I that do all the heavy lifting these days. And it has been amazing getting Wayne on board, because Wayne is one of the most respected Indigenous artists / photographers in Australia at this point in time. And there's probably no other person that's spent more time in more Indigenous communities all around Australia than Wayne. As I said to you before, is that, when I get to call Wayne most days, it's not where's Wally, it's where's Wayne. He could be in any part of Australia at any time. It's not uncommon for him to drive 3,000 kilometres in 2 days, and maybe 10,000 kilometres in a week. And it's been an amazing experience setting up this brand and being a part of what it was originally called Gondwana, and we changed it to Mt Yengo in 2019. And basically, we have a small partnership with a vineyard in the Hunter Valley that backs onto Mt Yengo National Park. That's where the name comes from. So with us is that, we make a wide range of amazing wines, and we've grown our portfolio extensively. But also what we've done extensively is we've grown our footprint on the cultural aspect of our business, which Wayne has brought on board and done so amazingly.
And I mean, I guess, Wayne, we've talked about this whole cultural side, and yes, from everything I can see from your photography, from your art, it absolutely, well done. It's really inspiring. Just seeing some of the photos, it tells a story when I see it. So, I mean, should we talk about the artwork for a second? Because it feels like, each bottle is telling a story. So what has been your plan when designing these labels?
Yeah, and that's the whole context of it. I've been working on our communities for 35 years, and art is who I am as an Aboriginal storyteller. I need to be able to tell our stories of just not my own, from my land, but from everybody else's. And elders and communities from across the country have given me permission to basically reinterpret their stories. And when I'm out on country, that means when I'm out on somebody's land, I go to the local people. I let them know that I'm there and what I'm doing, and then they will give me permission to go out and walk their lands and gather their stories and not so much reinterpret them, but to give a different aspect to what traditional storytelling really means. So when I come on board with Ben and Gary, I've always had three sort of major things I've always wanted to do in my life. One is to have an exhibition up in Times Square in New York, up on the big screens. Another one was to have a major show in Germany, in Berlin, and to have a wine label. And when I heard these guys, I know it's a funny thing, and the dreams and aspirations grow every day. But when I saw what Ben and Gary were doing, I went, wow, this is really personal to who I am as an artist. And the stories are evolving. Every bottle, every label that we create, Ben and I talk all the time about what works, what story is being told at the time, and how the story's created. So Ben's as much as knowledgeable as I am now, and he continues to come out on country with me. One of my favourite stories is I took Ben and my daughter Tanisha, and we went out to it's called APY lands in Central Desert, Ananu Pitnyara Yankanjara, and a very remote community. And that's where they play our national sport, national AFL. It's a cross between, say, Gaelic football and soccer and a lot of different games. And Ben come out on country, and we went to a lot of these small communities where he got to experience what traditional culture is. And that's a part of our brand, is that we are not just saying that we're an Aboriginal company. We live the life. We engage with our people, and it's so important that the art showcases who we are in our storytelling.
Have you found, as an Aboriginal company, that there's been difficulties, there's been some lessons on the way? Has it just been kind of just this wonderful thing that you've run with and it's just grown and expanded? How's the journey been?
To begin with, that initial right at the start, a lot of people would say, well, Indigenous wine brand, there's obviously, the Indigenous people had issues with alcohol, and it's done damage to the community. And for me, initially, it was like, well, I'm Irish. Obviously, alcohol's done a lot of damage to the Irish as well. But, our main aim is to create fine wine and promote Indigenous art and culture and get it into people's hands. And it's another way to bring people together so people can learn about this. So after we actually explained that to a lot of elders initially way at the start, they went, oh, okay, I get that. That's great. Yeah, okay, fantastic. So we haven't really had any issues in that regard over the last 5 years. It was more about just growing the brand and then having the opportunity to bring, like to me, being a white fella in this business with these guys, I've been on this journey to learn about Indigenous art and culture, learn all these stories and songlines. And, I felt sort of quite naive that at my age and being well educated that I didn't have much knowledge at all. And I'm university educated, went to a very good school. So being part of this journey with these guys and in this brand, it's about bringing this art and culture to people. And what better way than wine, which is a great avenue to bring people together and to talk.
I think, you've hit on something that I felt like I want to ask you these questions because I want to learn. Because if I hold my hands up, I don't know about the long history of Australia or many cultures around the world, which is why and we have so much to learn from them. There's obviously joys and wonderful things with our technology these days, but actually when we look backwards, we can often then actually plan properly for the future, right? It seems to be this is the thing that we need to do. We've forgotten it. So I love that you've also said that you're learning on the way, Ben. How have you found you're running this company? It's a beautifully ethical company. I assume with everything that you're learning, that you've implemented things within the winery. Could you share any practices that perhaps, say, somebody listening has their own winery that they could possibly do, or what you found has worked really well for everybody in terms of inclusivity as a team, as a community?
Yeah, I might start on that one, Ben, and you can take over from it.
Okay, Wayne.
Yeah, one of the things I think is really important, Ben and I have just come back from South Australia where we brought over some American buyers. And the thing that we really pride ourselves on is, apart from the quality of the product that we ran, is that when we're talking, we went up to one of the bottling plants and we were sitting in there with the chemists and talking about how they create the wine. I was really interested because I'm not a wine aficionado. I love tasting. I'm learning as we go. Ben has taught me so much and I continue to learn. But when we were talking to them about, the chemical process of how they bring it to get together, and then we start to talk about our connection to land and culture and about how we are so in tune with nature and where it comes from, I think it's a two-way street now, is because they're coming from a process-driven, non-Indigenous perspective, whereas we're bringing an Indigenous perspective of how we are connected to country. And it's this beautiful marriage now of winemakers wanting to know a lot more about where their grapes have been grown, the land of who their grapes are on, the past history of the land, and why it is so important that we discover and we all learn. And it's a two-way street. And that's why when Ben was talking about, we have a thing called Songlines, dreaming tracks. And they're basically these unsigned places that we walk before non-Indigenous people come to this country. These are the tracks that the ancestors walked, and they looked after country. They did traditional burning. They wouldn't go back to one place for a couple of years because they'd burn off. They'd let the animals come back. The bush would regenerate. The native habitat would regenerate, and then they'd go back and they'd camp there again in a few years' time. So we're explaining these processes to our growers and to our winemakers, and they're now embedding their sort of knowledge into what our storylines are. And I'll hand it over to you, brother.
Yeah, well, it just exactly what Wayne said is, with us, we don't have a vineyard per se. We have contracts with growers. We have different winemakers that make the wine for us. But that relationship that we've established with these growers and these winemakers and the bottling plants and stuff, it's actually been reconciliation in action, because we've brought to them, a lot of these people have no idea of who, like Wayne said, the land that they're on and the ancestors that walked it and the different stories and the songlines. And So with us creating this brand, it's not just us, making wine and selling it. It's actually it's reconciliation in action, and it's amazing how so many people are grateful just to learn and to hear and to be part of it. So as it always say with us is we're not just a wine brand or a winery. There's a lot more to what we do. And as I said, is that with Wayne, with the stories and him actually spending so much time in all these remote communities around Australia and bringing those stories to people, where there's an opportunity now. We export into the US and China. We're actually looking for a UK. We're actually looking for a UK one. So anyone out there that's interested in Mt Yengo in the UK, we're here, ready to talk.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more of a journey, and we like to bring people on that journey in what we do.
So how about then, you've mentioned exporting is happening. I'm very happy to hear this. And you're talking about each wine having a story. You are talking about working with different growers in different areas. Can you maybe introduce us all to some of maybe your flagship wine? Where does it come from? How are you working with the grower? What have they learned?
So we've got, we have our Adelaide Hills range. So with our Adelaide Hills range, we have a Shiraz, a Sauv Blanc, Pinot Gris, and a sparkling. Now, the Pinot Gris, that comes from right up at the north end of Adelaide Hills, an area called Castembul or Kangaroo Creek. It has its own little microclimate, this vineyard that we work with, and the grower there is an ex-professor, an ex-science professor, retired, bought this property, and he lives just there, and he loves what he does, and we work with him. He gets about 100 tonne of Pinot Gris off that property every year, so we get a large portion. It has its own little microclimate. It's like a big valley, and it gets quite hot, but it doesn't get too much wind. Then with our Sauv Blanc, that's right down the bottom end of Adelaide Hills where Shaw and Smith is. So Shaw and Smith are very famous for their Sauv Blanc. We're pretty much across the road from those guys, not too far from Harndorf. So we're a north-facing hill which gets a lot of breeze, a lot of cool breezes. So it's a fantastic spot for Sauv Blanc in the Adelaide Hills, because you got to remember this is all 500 or between 300 and 500 metres above sea level too. So it is cold climate, not so much in the north end, but it still is. So the Adelaide Hills creates amazing whites. And, our sparkling it's a Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, which was on lees for 27 months, nice and creamy, nice little strawberry hints at the end. It's a beautiful sparkling wine. Adelaide Hills Shiraz, there's actually not too much Shiraz that's actually created grown in the Adelaide Hills anymore, because it being cold climate, it's very lighter in style. Yeah. Pinot Noir is getting a lot more popular. So a lot of people are actually taking the Shiraz and doing the Pinot Noir, but we love the Shiraz we've got. It's almost like a Sangiovese, a little bit heavier than a Sangiovese. So it's quite interesting because people go, I didn't expect that from Australian wine. And then the next range is, we have a range which we do a lot more for functions and things, and that comes from the Riverina area, so near Griffith. So we have a sparkling, a Sauv Blanc, a Pinot Grigio. The Pinot Grigio actually comes up very nicely in that climate because it's a very dry, warm climate there. That style of grape does very well and there's a lot of Italians in that Riverina area. We have a South Australian Shiraz that's sort of Riverland and Langhorne Creek. So that sort of rounds out that sort of portfolio of our wines. We still do have a Barossa Shiraz and a McLaren Vale Cab Shiraz. That comes off the back of a lot of the stuff I used to do into China. So my main business before I set this up was exporting to China. So I make, probably 40 different brands for people in China. That's just come back on, but it's still quiet. But, what we do, we're a big focus on our Adelaide Hills range is our premium. And then we have our sort of a level down, which is we sell a lot to corporates. We sell into bottle shops and things at that level down as well.
Can you talk a little bit more about your Riverina wines? Because for so much of the bulk wines of Australia comes from not just Riverina, Riverland, the Murray-Darling, so all of, within this same area where it is very, very hot, but also they can easily be irrigated. But the quality, especially Riverina, they make some stunning fortified wines. But I've heard a lot about there seems to be a lot more renewed focus on quality there. Is this something that has been going on for longer than I realise, or is it just more of a newfound energy?
Well, yeah, because obviously the cheap bulk market, the bottom's dropped out of it. If you look into China, that sort of cheaper wine market is basically disappearing. The average cost of, wine going into China market ranges from $6.50 a litre to $8 a litre now, which is much more high end. So a lot of people in that Riverina and Riverland area, they've had to pivot because if they don't, they die. So there was an oversupply of that sort of cheaper style wine. So, and people are concentrating a lot more on different grape styles, like your Tempranillos, and so they're diversifying. Things like Pinot Grigio does very well in the Riverina area with that dry climate. The Riverina is heavily irrigated as well, so there is a lot of water. But it'll be very interesting to see what happens in that market. Obviously, you've got a lot of the entry-level wines that are sold in like Jacobs Creek that has their entry-level range that comes out of the Riverina, or they'll call it Southeastern Australia, which encompasses a much bigger area. So a lot of people won't realise what Southeastern Australia is. For the reds, it's always a struggle, Southeastern Australian reds. Like if you look for Riverina, that's what we do, a South Australian Shiraz, and we add a bit of Langhorne Creek because it gives it a bit more muscle.
Okay.
But the whites out of the Riverina come up quite well. Sauv Blanc, Pinot Grigio, Chardonnay comes up quite well. Not as good as your cold climate like we do in the Adelaide Hills, but it still comes up very well. The reds come up a bit light in the Riverina area. They get better as it goes into Riverland. And then we always bulk it up with a bit of Langhorne Creek or something as well too. But it's interesting to see what will happen because the Chinese wine market is in a very bad state, even though it opened up for Australia again. The economy is very bad. So there's a lot of vineyards that are struggling to get rid of their wines. But it's not just that. Like you look in the Barossa region, 60% of the reds in the Barossa were going to China. So when that market stopped for 3 years, there's millions and millions of litres sitting there. So we're in interesting times. Obviously the economies aren't too well around the world too, which means, that has a play on what's going on. But it's interesting in China, there's been a real push on very high end. So I've been supplying some high end Barossa to the Chinese market at the moment because that's basically the only thing that's selling.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you mentioned that you're obviously buying wines from Riverina, which that is in New South Wales, isn't it?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Riverina's in Griffith. It's in it's in New South Wales. So Riverina is all New South Wales.
Mm-hmm. But you mentioned earlier about Hunter Valley, which is very much New South Wales. Are you getting any fruit at all now from Hunter Valley?
We've had a bit of bad luck with the property. So it's almost biblical issues in the Hunter Valley. In the last few years, we've had fires, frost and floods.
Wow.
So all we know, we're just waiting for the locusts. They might come next year. We're not sure. We're just waiting for them. But the property that we're working with our friend there in Broke in the Hunter Valley, there's Chardonnay on the property. So we've got people screaming, like, when are you going to have your Chardonnay ready? Hopefully for 2026. But, as I said, that's, if the locusts don't come.
Oh, bless you. Actually, that's beautiful, though, to think about having your cool climate wines from Adelaide Hills in South Australia. Then you've got the really warm, the really hot area of the Riverina. And then actually Hunter Valley is very much, isn't it, that cloud cover. It's for me, Hunter Valley is such an interesting wine region that it's so difficult to grow grapes, but has such a beautiful quality coming out of it.
It is. Hunter Valley is very limited. And what's Hunter Valley is very, very strong is Semillon and Chardonnay. Very strong in those two.
Actually, I don't know if you know this answer. Semillon, of course, is one of these beautiful wine wonders from Hunter Valley that is almost like a secret for so many people. Insane, amazing. But Chardonnay has really just shown how beautiful it can be. Is Chardonnay overtaking the plantings of Semillon in Hunter Valley?
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
I think it's 100% Chardonnay, yes. Because Semillon it's a very small market for Semillon. Very,
Shame.
I love Semillon. It's a lovely wine, but worldwide, many people wouldn't even know what it is.
Yeah.
It gets blended as a Sem Sav Blanc,
Such a shame. But anyway, everyone listening, I did actually do a podcast with Tyrrells many years ago. Maybe I'll link it into the podcast. Semillon for me is just such a beautiful wine. What would you say is your flagship? What is the flagship wine?
The flagship at the moment is our Adelaide Hills range, which we've just been honing for the last. Yeah, so we've just been honing for the last few years, and now that we've got some serious supply, like we supply Carnival Cruises on their cruise ships out of Australia. So having the opportunity to do some volume, then we've got serious, and we've got good relationship with the growers, and and we can put a lot of effort. And obviously, it's you more elegant and finite and beautiful wines. So they are definitely our flagship now. We've obviously that we sell a lot of our entry level wines, from the Riverina and that SA Shiraz. We sell that in large amounts, but obviously if you want something that's beautiful and elegant and sexy, well, our Adelaide Hills range is way up there. And also the thing is that the best thing about what our brand is the development of the labels, as with Wayne's art and how we've just it's like fine wine, like a fine red wine. Is over time we've just got better and better, and the art that we've got on the labels now. Well, Wayne can explain about the Adelaide Hills range.
Let's do it. Wayne, talk to me about what the stories in those labels of the Adelaide range are.
Yeah, when we sit down and we don't just create the labels, we create the stories, and we listen to the land, and we listen to the voices of the old people and to tell us the stories and how we create the art. I suppose there's two definitive styles of art comes from, and one's called Lawada, which means beautiful woman. So that's because the respect for women, birthing our children, continuity of culture is that I've been creating this art for over 30 years. That connection of the female form with the textures of land and earth. There's one there. Ben's got one up on the screen. The art comes from that sense of where the land is and the importance of land and the importance of women and how we respect both, because they're the givers of life. So with that Lawana series, we find it's a real talking piece. People want to know a lot more about it. They see the art and they feel that connection, and it gives us the songlines or the storylines of, in particular, non-Indigenous people want to know a lot more about it. Whereas that when we went into Coles, one of our major retailers or shopping brands over here, is that we work with their teams to create a new series of labels, which will be probably a little bit more identifiable as Indigenous artwork, because I think Ben's reaching down for one now. We work with the team to find out what would resonate with people, what would people walk into a bottle shop and buy. So we created a series that's called Billa and Baloo, which is the moon chasing the sun, which is also a story about connection and who we are as a people, and the flow on stories. Because everything in our culture before the settlement, all our stories were never written down. We never had the written word. It was always done by song, dance and art. So a lot of our stories and a lot of our songs is all in our artworks. And over there in the UK, for instance, we've got this incredible Indigenous art gallery. My daughter and I came over a couple of years ago. And when we sat down, we started to share those stories of our artwork about how that's how we teach our young ones. It's incredible how many people sat down and we never knew that. We never knew those songlines. We never knew those stories to tell us more. So hopefully, which we're working with Austrade at the moment, they're heavily invested in what we're doing in our brand, and they want to bring us across to Europe to basically share these stories along with our wine. So hopefully we can maybe go to Pro Wine and set ourselves up there and do a big series of storytelling. I think it'll be incredible.
Well, can you tell me a story that has possibly been one of the most profound, one that you feel really, touches the heart, that maybe affects people on a day-to-day, something they can use as advice for living? What comes to mind when I ask you that?
Yeah, those stories, you know what, it's a daily occurrence, because Ben and I were on a call yesterday with EY, Ernst & Young. We went in there, and Ernst & Young now was supplying all their corporate buildings around Australia. They're on their reconciliation action plan, on their reconciliation journey, because, understanding is connecting with our people. It's going back to the old ways. And they're really, really keen to learn and connect. And for them, every single one of them has this story that they want to talk to their children about. They want to grow up in a world where they know more about our culture. They want to grow up in a world where they can proudly go to school and they can talk about the land that they live on. And our culture's always been that way. It's always been that, not divide and conquer. It's always been about, walking together. And this is what we do with our art and our wine, is we walk together. And Ben and I put together an immersion many years ago. I was the featured artist at a thing called Vivid Festival up in Sydney, where they projected my art up on the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And we brought down people to the base of the bridge, and we took the people down. We explained about what the artwork was meant to be about, why we created, why we developed it. Then we went back and we sat down. We worked with an Indigenous food company. They created all the beautiful food, native bush tucker for us. We brought in a lot of my friends who were dancers. And the beautiful thing about it, we had all the corporates sitting there, tasting the wine, tasting the food, having an amazing night. But the dancers, we took them out onto the streets where all the public were. And we had the wine there, we had the dance there, and then all of a sudden, masses of crowds all joined in this beautiful big quabbery. They all started to sing. They all started to be a part of it. And it was such that I was standing there, I was filming it, and I was looking, I go, wow, it may be a small wine brand, but we are creating the platform for people to join us on the journey. And it's this happens to us all the time, doesn't it, Beck?
But it was the funny thing with that is that they did like a smoking ceremony for the people in our group. So went out there, they set up the thing, and next minute, we had like 30 people for a sit-down 3-course meal. I think that night it was Deloitte. And then next minute, when they're going through this, like, the whole crowd started doing it. So there was like a line of like 300 people wanting to go through and do the smoking ceremony as well, because they're all in the street. So it became like a massive thing, and everyone was taking photos, and it was an amazing experience, like Wayne said.
Do you know, actually, when you actually talk about what's really good for our bodies from this health perspective, and seeing ourselves as the mammals that we are, dancing and singing and moving the body are things that so often we just don't do anymore because we're too busy, we're stressed out and whatever. And so I guess actually just from listening to you, and you're saying, it's the culture and learning about the land, but it's almost like a reminder that this is what we as human beings are supposed to do. We're supposed to be in a community. It takes a village to raise a child, right? And the more we connect together, the more we move, the more we sing, the more joy we raise. Because I feel more joyful just thinking about the idea of a crowd of people all singing and dancing together. Right? I think this is the message, effectively, isn't it?
It is the message, sis, and you've got it in one, and this is what we do. I go to a lot of our cultural festivals. So we have major gatherings of traditional tribes, and also in urban areas where we come together. Tomorrow night, for instance, we've got here our football. It's called Dream Time at the G, where we have two of our major clubs come together at this massive big stadium where we celebrate. We will have dances. We'll have a smoking ceremony. We'll have our elders talk about connection to country. And you know what? Everybody gets up. Everybody gets involved. We do a thing called the long walk. We walk from the city. We walk there. We all join together. This is exactly what we're meant to do as human beings, is connect and enjoy and learn our stories, not by sitting in a classroom, but by being out on country and learning these things. And I'm in a very, very fortunate position that I get to do so many of these festivals and gatherings and record and document them, photograph and film and drone and capture the essence of who we are. You know what? Maybe what we should do is we should send some of the footage and the photos and get your listeners to be involved themselves and to have a look at what our people do in the way that we celebrate.
Please do. And I, for everyone listening, will share some of that on my Instagram profile. So eat, sleep _ wine repeat. Again, I'll put that information in the show notes. So that's a great thing, I think, for somebody who respectfully wants to engage more with Aboriginal culture. I guess just seeing evidence of what that means in video format is potentially a good start. But is there any other recommendations other than, of course, drinking more of your wines and learning more of the stories? Is there anywhere else that somebody should begin to go down that journey to open up their eyes to that culture?
Yeah, and you mentioned it earlier when we were having a bit of a yarn there about how we're going back to the old ways, about how we're so far advanced in technology, which, I personally love technology. I'm not very good at it, but I do love it. With AI now, we call it Aboriginal intelligence. Because,
that's funny.
But someone else has no doubt made it up, but I'm going to coin it here on your show. So we've got this beautiful essence of how we are reverting back to the old ways, that we are really learning as a community, we're gathering as a group, we're coming together to share the wonderment of the world. And, I've got this beautiful 16-year-old daughter and my wife where we purposefully visit other cultures around the world. We actively engage in other people's cultures because we've all got it. We're all embedded within the essence of who we are to connect. And some of the most beautiful ways of doing that is searching out, being on this journey, but not being afraid to ask the question. And we found that a lot of people want to know more about culture, more about art, more about these things, but they say we're afraid to offend. And the thing is, we don't get offended because when our young ones come to us, they will just blurt it out, as any child would. They'll come out and blurt it out. And, the question may be quite inane, but they want to learn. And this is what I think, we've got to get rid of all these things as adults being afraid of looking silly. I go out on country all the time and I'll sit there like a 5-year-old and ask some of the silliest questions you will ever ask in your life. And you know what? I get a lot of silly answers too, because a lot of I talk to Ben quite often about how many times the old aunties trick me. They'll lead these big, long, in-depth stories and I'm sitting there going, wow. Then they'll start laughing. They go, you believed that, boy, didn't you? And it's the fun and the wonderment. And this is what we've got to do. We've got to have fun. We've got to wonder what the universe is going to bring up next. And this is the fun part of this journey. Is finding all these stories and all this enjoyment and happiness that's out there in the world. And, just go out, look, ask the question.
I love that. I guess, you've really ticked all my boxes in terms of just inspiring me, wanting me to ask more questions. So thank you. I guess I just want to, as we kind of sum up this episode, bring it back to the land. Where the vines are growing. You've talked about sharing knowledge with the growers so that they can, I guess, adapt their practices. What have they... I guess the point is regenerative viticulture. It's taking care of the soils. It's working with not just the vines, but the trees around and the animals. But what have you found from working with the growers? Are they all heading towards that regenerative viticulture? Have they done anything to surprise you?
I'll start with this and then Ben can take over because Ben's really knowledgeable in this area. I've found that when we've gone up to some of our growers is that they've reverted back to understanding the traditional lands. One in particular where they took us down to where they'd engaged with the local mob, the local community, and talked about where this small rivulet come through their property and the gum trees that grew there, and they wanted to know more about the story. So they're starting to look, well, you say looking backwards. The reality is they're going back to understanding the natural lay of the land and what was there before, because unfortunately, in the early days, a lot of non-Indigenous people basically raped and pillaged the land. They cut all the native trees down. They got rid of the animals. They basically fences up willow trees in the rivers, which sucked all the essence and the life out of the rivers. They're learning now that destroying the property is not helping them. They're now regenerating the land with native species. They're bringing back a lot of the windbreaks with our big gum trees. They're learning about regenerative bushfires now. How we burn. We just didn't go and light a fire and burn in a single line. Different tribes around the country had circular burning, where you'd burn in a circle and it'd slowly burn out so the animals could escape. Others here in Victoria have a triangular burning, so it's burnt from four corners again, so the animals had the opportunity to escape, and the fires would burn back on themselves. And now non-Indigenous people are learning that traditional practices can help in maintaining and regenerating the land. But I'll hand over to Ben now and some of the experiences that he's had as well.
Okay, thank you.
Look, obviously, with us, we don't have a strong say on what the growers do or what the different people we do, but we've always raised a point, and it's been interesting, especially with Wayne. He asks a lot of those questions and everything that he's explained and gets that in. And I know the guys up at O'Leary Walker, where we were making some of our wines in the Clare, took some of the stuff that Wayne had said to them on board and implemented some of those ideas. It's a slow process in some people. Obviously, there's some people that have been in the industry for a long time. Other people are quite progressive and happy to change their ideas. You'll see a lot of them they do. There's a lot of recycling of water and bringing a lot more vegetation, putting olive groves on the properties around the vines and different things as well. But in essence, we don't have much of a say on how things are done. Obviously, with Wayne on board, he has given a lot of knowledge where some of them have taken that on board, and that's made a difference. And hopefully as time goes on that, with the knowledge that Wayne imparts to them, that they do come around more and implement some of the old ways that have always been around for thousands of years in Australia.
It's beautiful to hear that so many are listening and changing. And I guess I'm sufficiently inspired. Thank you very much. I hope our listeners are too. Maybe just to finish off, perhaps I'd love to hear from both of you. I don't know. One story, a lesson, a final quote that you carry with you in your life that you hope will stay with each listener after this episode.
From my perspective, apart from, as we've discussed, the intense joy and happiness and fulfillment I get from my own culture and my own people, is that what I'm loving about the journey that Mt Yengo is on is that I have so many of our people, so many Indigenous people from the Torres Strait to the Tiwi Islands to my country, Tasmania, are saying how proud they are to see an Aboriginal wine label that upholds our cultural values and is so important to see us growing as a business. They all want to work with us. I haven't experienced any negativity from any of my own people about us being in this industry. All I've seen is the pride and the joy and the support from people to say, what you're doing is you're creating the future for our young ones. And I can't be more proud of that. And to have Ben as, like I said, not only as a business partner, but as a really good friend with him and his families, that inspires me to do more. And I just can't wait to see where this journey takes us.
Thanks, Wayne. Ben, what do you think?
Well,
Any last lessons?
This has been an amazing journey. I've worked in liquor for over 30 years. I used to be in spirits. I launched Patron Tequila into Australia.
No.
But being on this journey now with this brand, Mt Yengo, I can sleep at night happy knowing that I'm in a position at not just creating beautiful wines, but educating people and bringing people in to learn more about Indigenous art and culture, making them feel welcome to walk on the journey with us. So my cup is full when I can sit home at night and be so happy. And the relationship I have with Wayne and learning so much from him, because as I said, there's no one that's spent more time and so many Indigenous communities around Australia. And that's what probably a lot of people don't realise, is that how vastly different Indigenous communities across Australia are. All the different mobs are so different. And, it's infinite. So for me, every day is a learning experience, which I'm so grateful to be a part of.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Today, I've learned a lot. I think everyone listening has as well. And I look forward to tasting those wines, sharing in the stories when they're in the UK, which they will be shortly, I am sure. So thank you, guys. Thank you for sharing a little bit about what Mt Yengo is and what it supports.
Our pleasure, sis. You take care of yourself, eh?
Thank you so much for having us on.
Pleasure. Thank you. Bye, guys. I'm so grateful to Wayne and Ben for sharing such powerful stories. If only you heard the ones not on air, but they have certainly reminded me that wine truly is a vessel for culture, connection, and meaningful change. Now, next week, we head to South Africa for another inspiring story, this time with Julia Moore from Bosman Family Vineyards, based in the beautiful Wellington region. Bosman was named Winery of the Year in the Platter's Wine Guide and Ethical Winery of the Year at the Drinks Business Green Awards. With 26% worker ownership, their model of equity and empowerment is as impressive as the wines themselves. We'll talk about what true sustainability and inclusion looks like in practice, why Tim Atkin named their viticulturalist the best in South Africa, and have an incredible deep dive into the world of vine nurseries and terroir. Trust me, this one's packed. But to finish off, a quote as always. Not a wine quote today, but to go with today's powerful, thoughtful episode, I've chosen one said by Stan Grant, a journalist who is of Wiradjuri heritage, one of the largest Aboriginal nations in Australia. And he said, "When we share our stories, we find connection. And in connection, we find our common humanity." Wishing you all a wonderful week ahead, and may it be filled with meaningful stories, authentic connections, and of course, great wine. And whilst you are sharing your stories, please do share this one with your wine-loving friends. Like the podcast, leave a review or rating. This all makes the podcast more discoverable. Until next Monday, wine friends, cheers to you.